Welcome back, my fellow story listeners. Get ready for an unbelievable tale that blurs the line between the living and the supernatural world. Join me as I share a personal experience that still haunts my memories till today. It is a true life story, and I am a living witness to this tale. Growing up amidst petty traders and hardworking farmers, life in our small community was far from easy. Each day started before the sun rose, with chores awaiting us and school preparations to be made. Parents, mostly petty traders and farmers, toiled tirelessly to provide food for their families. Yet despite the hardship, we found moments of joy and laughter amidst the daily struggles. My siblings and I, together with the children in the community, crafted a world of joy with our imaginations, homemade toys, and playful adventures in the dusty streets. Saturdays were dedicated to farming, a grueling task that I dreaded so much. Walking heavily with farm tools through long distances and scaling steep hills just to reach our farms felt like an endless journey to me. But despite the reluctance, it was a must. It was the source of our livelihood and the only means for us to survive. So with heavy hearts and tired feet, we pressed on, knowing that farming was not a choice, but a necessity for our community's sustenance. Our old missionary school was a few miles away, and it nestled among ancient graveyards. Surprisingly, we grew accustomed to their presence and had no fear of ghosts or spirits. To us, death was simply a crossover journey to another world, and life carried on without hesitations. A few years went by, and a young man in his early 20s settled into one of the newly constructed homes just a few blocks from our house. He had a simple appearance of average height and dark in complexion. He ran a small restaurant in town where he served mouth-watering meals. His culinary creations were legendary and were known far and wide for their exquisite flavors and tantalizing aromas. No one knew where he came from or how he acquired his extraordinary cooking skills. Yet none of that mattered to the locals as long as they could savor his delectable meals. He was a very peaceful man, gentle in nature, and very friendly to the kids, including me. He won our hearts with his flawless cooking and generosity. Every day, he will roam the community street with his old wooden cart adorned with pots and pans bubbling with savory stews, aromatic spices, and delicious soups. The locals were eagerly lined up, their mouths watering in anticipation of his next masterpiece. He did this every day before finally settling in his little restaurant where he served his walk-in customers. He also ensured that we never went hungry by setting aside meals each day for the kids in our community. He knew our parents often worked late and sometimes returned home exhausted, making it impossible for them to cook. This made him earn the love of everyone around us, and we were overjoyed to have him as part of our community. After residing in our community for several months, he found himself smiting with the landlord's daughter. She was a beautiful young woman in her early 20s. They had been dating secretly until she became pregnant, prompting them to reveal their love publicly. This revelation greatly enraged the landlord, leading him to file a petition with the local police accusing our beloved chef of rape. Facing an unjust imprisonment, the community stood up against the injustice leading to his release. The landlord finally bowed to pressure, allowing their love to flourish. Besides, whether the landlord liked it or not, our beloved neighbor was now part of his family, as he was the father of his unborn grandchild and also the love of his daughter's life. Years went by, and now a teenager, I felt ready for new adventures. So I made the decision to attend school in a different town. Thankfully, my parents supported my choice and took care of all the arrangements. I was filled with excitement at the prospect of a fresh start, meeting new people and discovering new opportunities. Little did we know that the story of our beloved community chef was about to take an unexpected and chilling dark turn. One day, I was sitting in class when suddenly my phone started ringing. I picked up the call and I heard my sister's panicked voice on the other side. "Lucy, where are you?" she exclaimed. "I am in class," I whispered back to her. "Can I call you later?" But my sister wouldn't have it. "Forget class right now, Lucy," she cried. "Find a nearby church with strong spiritual vibes and ask the pastor to do a thorough deliverance on you." Confused and scared, I asked her what was going on. "Uncle Pius is a ghost, oh!" she screamed. I was bewildered. "Which Uncle Pius?" I asked. "Our beloved Uncle Pius the chef," she replied urgently. "Just follow my instructions, I will explain everything later." And with that, she hung up abruptly, leaving me shaking and curious. I sat there stunned silence, completely lost in my thoughts. I didn't even realize my lecturer was calling my name until he gave me a sharp tap on the back of my head. "Ouch!" I screamed. That definitely snapped me out of it. I quickly gathered my books into my bag, mumbled an apology to him, and dashed out of the class as fast as possible. As I arrived at church, I was greeted by a scene of chaos. Childhood friends now living in the same town for study were crying and panicking. The pastor and his team were working hard to bring calm, but the chaos seemed overwhelming. Finally, after a spiritual ordeal to banish the ghostly encounter, we all returned home feeling relieved. Later during the weekend, I decided to visit my community, and what I heard sent shivers down my spine. It turns out our beloved neighbor had gone out to sell his delicious meals as usual, but what happened next was anything but ordinary. So he had gone to the car garage where he usually sold food to the young mechanics. Coincidentally, a middle-aged man from one of the neighboring countries had come to our community to fix his car. Intrigued by our beloved chef's famous meals, he decided to purchase a plate of his delicious meal. Impressed by how well it was prepared, he asked for the chef's number, intending to become a regular customer whenever he was in town. However, Pius had rudely brushed off the man's friendly gesture, ignoring his request, and continued serving other customers. Frustrated, the man confronted Pius, demanding to know why he was being ignored. Suddenly, the man's expression turned to one of fear and disbelief. "Lucius, is it really you?" the man exclaimed before collapsing to the ground. As the crowd gathered around, Pius' spectral form flickered for a moment. An expression of anguish crossed his face. With mournful gaze, Pius vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the lingering aroma of his delicious meals. The locals stood in stunned silence, unsure of what they have just witnessed. Some attempted to force the food they have eaten from our beloved chef earlier that day by sticking their fingers down their throats in a panic-striking attempt to rid themselves of any potential harm. Others fled for their lives. It was a chaotic scene filled with fear and disbelief. The man was quickly rushed to the hospital where he was revived. With a tremble in his voice, he recounted the shocking truth about our beloved chef. It turned out our beloved chef's real name was Lucius, and he had met a tragic end 20 years ago during a violent attack on their community by unknown gunmen. The man recounted attending Lucius' funeral and witnessing his burial with his own eyes. He described Lucius as a kind and quiet young man who never sought trouble and was always willing to help others. With a sense of disbelief, he revealed that we have been unknowingly patronizing a ghost all this while. Our beloved chef was in fact a man long departed from this world. The revelation sent shock waves all over the hospital room, and the man, unable to contain his horror, broke free from the nurse's grasp and fled away, his screams echoing in the corridors. I sat there, stunned into silence. So all these years, I murmured, my voice barely audible through the tears. We have been eating the food of a ghost. The realization sent shivers down my spine. What will become of the landlord's daughter and her son? So many questions swirled in my mind, each one more unsettling than the last. Beside me, my mother remained silent, her gaze fixed on the cooking spoon in her hand as if lost in thought. No wonder his food was so perfect, she whispered to herself. The man's revelation had left us all stunned, casting doubt on the very fabric of our reality. As time went by, the vibrant energy of our community faded into sadness and silence. Suspicion hung heavy in the air, and neighbors began to question each other's past. Background checks became common, casting a shadow of our once closely knitted community. The landlord, unable to bear the scandal, hastily sold his properties and relocated his family to another town. As they sped away in their old car, his voice echoed in anguish, repeatedly crying out, "Moku mokumo! Moku mokum!" To this day, the meaning of those words remain a mystery to me, but the intensity of his emotions was filled with pain and shock. As months became years, life slowly began to return to normal. The scars of our past remained, but the resilience of our community prevailed as we chose to move forward with our lives. The idea that our neighbor, whom we knew for nearly 14 years and ate his food regularly, was a ghost still boggles my mind till today. He was more than just a chef. His meals were legendary, and he brought so much joy to our community. Sometimes I wonder what he could be doing right now. Perhaps resting in his grave or still wandering around selling his delicious meals in a distant land. His sudden disappearance left so many unanswered questions, but his memory lives on in our hearts. Despite the mystery surrounding him, we chose to remember him as a kind chef who taught us the true meaning of compassion. He will forever be cherished in our memories. Well, my friends, we have come to the end of this story. Thank you all for being part of it. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please don't forget to show some love by liking, sharing, and subscribing to my YouTube channel. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you will always be notified when we unveil new and captivating stories. More to that, if you ever walked a similar path or experienced something relatable, we would love to hear your story too. Kindly drop a comment below and let us create a space for shared experiences. Until next time, take care and stay blessed. One love.